So for the past few days, I've been playing the 3D action platformer game, It Takes Two, which for those of you who don't know, is a co-op only experience where two players will have to work together in order to get through the game's many challenges. There's no AI partner to control the other character either, so you need to play this in co-op, and after playing it for around 15 or so hours, I eventually reached the end of the game and unlocked the gold It Took Two trophy, and because I had done everything else in the game up until that point, I also unlocked the platinum trophy for the game called Power Couple at the same time. And it's pretty funny really, because I wasn't expecting to beat It Takes Two because, well, I didn't have a co-op buddy, so I would have to test whether it really did take two, or if I could actually just take one person and use two controllers to control both characters at the same time and try and get through this co-op only experience. Was it going to be possible? Could I unlock that gold It Took Two trophy on my own? Well, as you can tell, I did. But what were the most bullshit parts of this game when playing it solo, which was not the intended way to play it? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's episode of That One Bullshit PlayStation Trophy. So, before I begin, I just wanted to quickly talk about some of the good stuff in this game for people who are going to be playing it solo, as there are a lot of design decisions made by the devs that really helps solo players, as the platforming is for the most part often just turn-based, where one character will do something that would allow the other character to move forward a bit, and then you'll sort of swap back and forth. So a lot of these times you're just taking it in turns anyway, so it's quite easy to do the move with one character, but put down that pad, pick up the other pad, and then do the move with the next character to move forward a bit. So you're sort of taking it in turns. It's kind of like a seesaw almost. There's a bit of back and forth as you progress through. So for a lot of the sections, they're quite easy to just swap between because you're not penalised by time limits or anything like that. You can sort of take your time with it. Another great feature is when you grab items, you sort of press R1 or maybe triangle, such as like the rope swings. Once you press that to grab them, the character is always grabbing it then, and he won't let it go until you press the button again. So this means that you don't have to hold it down, which frees up your hands to move the other character while they're just safely swinging. Some of the sections I thought would be quite trouble would be the ones where it's like a set piece sequence where you're sort of running in or out of the screen. But in these situations, you can just run with one character, get them to the very end, and then just switch to the other character who is standing at the very start of that sequence, safe and sound. And in sections where that doesn't quite work, you can just leave the one to just die and respawn constantly, because thankfully in this game, it doesn't matter if one character dies because they will always respawn, and you can speed up the respawn process by spamming triangle. So as long as you keep one character alive, the other one will always come back. However, if the two die at the same time, you will fail that section, but there's loads of really good checkpoints in this game, as well as mid-boss checkpoints, which really helps, and it will refill your health, but leave the boss's health where it was, at the halfway point, which is also good. So that's all the good stuff I can say. Let's talk about the bullshit parts that I struggled with when playing solo. So for all of these, I'm just going to do them in the order you see them in the game, instead of ordering them in the most bullshit sections, I think, because I think that would just flow easier as a video. So one of the first bits where I kind of struggled with was the vacuum tower boss, because combat in this game is the hardest thing to kind of just do on your own with the two controllers, because you'll often find that you can't just beat everything with one of the characters. You'll have to swap between them both to be able to use their special moves or whatever item they have for that chapter in order to defeat the boss or the enemy that you're fighting against. And it's probably the bosses where some people will struggle more than others, and this first one I found was a bit tricky because I was just trying to figure out what to do, and I didn't really have a tactic of how to beat the bosses at this point. But once I realised that as long as you keep one character alive, the other one can just die as many times as they like. They will just always respawn. That really helped me get a strategy for the boss, because I would just switch to whatever character I needed first, do whatever I needed to do with them, while the other character just kept dying, and then switch when I needed to. And this one was a little bit tricky because you have to keep the character that's idle higher up in the screen, closer to where the vacuum is. So when he shoots down those bomb things, they land in front of the vacuum tube that you're going to be using to suck them up and shoot them out. So it's a little bit tricky at this point to try and do that. But his attacks, for the most part, are easy to dodge. And once you get onto this top one, you need to hold up and keep it held up on that controller. So switching to the other one, jumping on and trying to aim and suck them up can be a little bit awkward. But yeah, combat is probably the hardest bit in this game to try and do on your own, purely because of just how frantic it can be. The first few chapters are quite simple and the enemies aren't that too hard to defeat, but when you start to get levels where you get maybe the scythe and the watering can thing and like weapons like that, that's when it becomes a bit harder, because you have to hold those down at times to aim and shoot, so you can't really do that as easily when you're trying to use both hands on both controllers. So the next bit that I found was a bit tricky was this chase sequence where you're chasing after the toolbox and he's like shooting down all these nails that will just pin you to the floor and sort of kill you if you're not careful. And it was just this section here where you need to use May in order to hammer this yellow sort of button thing in order to raise this sort of makeshift bridge, and then you need to swap back to the bloke in order to use his nails to pin it to the wooden post that you can see there so the bridge stays up. And that bit was just a really bit of an awkward section for me, because as you can see the toolbox is constantly trying to kill May with the screws, and it was just a bit awkward to try and hammer it, drop that pad, switch to the other pad, aim and throw that nail into that bridge holder thing to stop it before it fell down. That one definitely took me a couple of goes, as you can see there. It's not too bad, but it was a bit of an annoying section. Then the tool boss himself, he is a pain in the butt. He caused me a lot of restarts because there's certain moves he has here, like this sort of slam with his like spatula thing arm almost, will just kill you in one hit. So it's easy to just end up getting screwed by it. And then after he's done his attacks and he stays here, the aim is to get the guy onto the spatula and then use May to hammer the yellow area on his arm so it lifts it up, allowing you to attack with the bloke in the toolbox's weakness inside the toolbox itself. But you don't get a decent amount of time there to do that, especially when you're doing it on your own, because you're probably controlling May at the start, and then you've got to switch to the guy, get him over into position, then switch back to May and try and hammer that before he gets up. So that can be a bit tricky. And then further into the boss fight, there's bits where he'll start soaring the platform he's standing on, so the area to move around gets even smaller and smaller, and he starts doing the nail attacks, and then this spinning blade thing, which, as you see there, kills you in one hit. So it's quite easy to wipe out there, but thankfully, as you can see in this clip, you do respawn halfway through the boss battle, so he's already lost one of his arms. So we're already halfway through here, so it's kind of beneficial at times to die if you need to, but it is a tricky boss fight. It's one of the trickier ones, I thought, just because of his one-hit kill moves, the tight time limit to get onto his arm to launch up, and then when he just destroys the platform, it just makes it a more trickier fight than some of the others. It's quite a dangerous fight, this, and it might take you a few attempts. It certainly did me, but it is doable. It is definitely doable on your own using two controllers. So next up we have yet again another boss fight, the Wasp Queen, and this one was probably the most frustrating boss of all of them, to be fair, because it can be quite hard to hit it. So you basically have to use the guy to use his honey sort of machine gun cannon thing to stick all the honey onto the bees, and then use May to blow them up with her rifle. And you need to do this as well on the bee, so he has various red crosses on his body to weak spots that you have to hit with the honey and then blow up with May's rifle. So you got to do that to weaken him. But he has so many attacks on the floor of the area that you can easily wipe out, so your best bet is to have your idle character always going around on the rails. So you just need to press R1 and you can leave them there for a few seconds as they slowly go around, so you can concentrate on the other character. But there's certain points where the bees always seem to defend the one on the back, like the final spot, and it took me an absolute age to try and get into a good enough position where I could shoot the honey, but then also have May kind of behind, ready to shoot as soon as the honey blew up the bees, to create a small window where there was no one guarding the weak spot. And that's just how it was just really frustrating for me to try and do that final hit, because every time I blew up the bees, as you can see, they always come back, and the hole there just always filled up with more bees, and it was just really awkward to try and get the sort of rhythm and the timing down, because I could never quite get May to be on the position of the rail. So I would probably recommend you both stand by each other and then jump on the rail at the same time, so May's directly behind the guy ready to shoot. But yeah, that one definitely took me a fair few goes, and it was probably the most frustrating boss of all of them, just how awkward it is to hit towards the end of the fight. But the rail technique is definitely the best strategy there, I feel, to get through it with ease. Another hard section I had was the flying section. So for this bit, one of your characters will be flying the ship, and I think May is the one on the gunner. So you can move the camera with May to aim and shoot, but you've also got to try and keep a grip on where the plane is and not crash into the walls, because if you hit the walls, you'll often find you just blow up, and enemies will come from behind you, so you'll have to turn the camera around with May to shoot, but also try and look forward and backwards at the same time, and it gets a real hairy at points, because the tunnels you go through can get quite narrow, and then they'll sort of twist and turn. So your mind sort of goes a bit haywire because you'll be mixing the controls up, and then I think the plane controls are inverted, so that kind of messes you up a little bit. So you'll be pressing up, and you'll be going down, and that'll kind of mix you up. So you might want to change the controls for that if you can in the options. And there's just narrow corridors, and I often found that I was just low on health going through here, but a good tip is, if you can get further into the tunnel, I think getting to this point in the tunnel and dying, you're okay, because you'll respawn just before this section where you entered the tunnel, so you'll see all the big sort of balloon bits that come up, you've got to shoot them, but you get put back with more health. So I think this one would have been more of an absolute pain just doing it solo if your health didn't regenerate when you died. So that's definitely a good point of that, but it's still awkward. More awkward than that, though, is the bit that follows directly after, where you have a boss fight on top of the plane. So this bit is like a beat 'em up, so you press square to punch, triangle to punch, square to kick, and then X to jump, I think it is. So you've got to fight the squirrel, but you've also got to pilot the ship, the plane, so that bit can be really awkward, because you can get into the fight and you get distracted and you forget about the plane, and then the next thing you know, the plane's crashing into the wall and blowing up, and the punch and kick moves, unfortunately, they don't reach him, so you do need to move May over to him, and you'll also need to jump over and dodge his attacks, because he can easily outmaneuver you and beat you if you're not dodging. So it's very much an awkward section, this, and it took me a few goes to beat, because it is quite a tough boss fight, purely because of having to fight the boss, dodge the boss, but also move the plane at the same time. So it's definitely an awkward one to try and do these two things at once and keep your eyes on both things, but with a bit of practice you should be able to get it done. So next up we have this little section here where you have two characters on either side of this platform, so one's upside down and one's the normal way up, and you've got to flick these switches, and then this platform moves across this laser conveyor belt, but you've also got to jump over lasers that will kill you instantly, and it's only a short little section, but you can see here from the full video I had on it, I died a few times, so you have to do 2 jumps over these upright lasers, and then you need to immediately crouch by pressing circle with the 2 characters afterwards, so you can squeeze between these other horizontal laser platforms, and it's only a tiny little bit in this section, but it was the hardest bit, because it's just trying to jump is just really awkward, and you definitely want to line them up just to make it easier on yourself. When I saw this bit, I just thought I wasn't going to get past it. It's one of those little wooden sort of ball maze things that you have, where you have to tilt the ball to get through a maze while avoiding the pitfalls. And this one, you have to use both characters, unfortunately. I did try doing it with just one character standing on it to try and move it, but it doesn't weigh enough of the box down in order to move the ball properly, so you need to try and get the 2 characters to stand together and then try and move the sticks at the same time in the same direction, and for the most part it worked, but every now and then I would find that the characters would just wander off in wrong directions, and it would mix me up, and then the ball would fall down the hole. So it can be a really frustrating section. And the worst thing is, once you do the one, the ball then teleports into the next one, and you have to do another maze, and this maze is even more tricky. But thankfully, if you fail this one, you don't get put back at the first one. So it is a little bit lenient, but it is an awkward section to get through, and it really did annoy me after a while. So this next bit that follows on just after that room with the maze puzzles is this bit here where you have this ball pit, and if you jump into the ball pit or fall into it, you die. And the only way to get across to the other bit of the room where the door is to jump on this numbered platform. But when this numbered platform is jumped on, it will start to sink into the ball pit, but another numbered platform will appear, and you basically have to jump on these numbered platforms to get across, and I think there's like 9 in total to get across the room. And as soon as you jump onto number 1, the annoying part is, when you do that, the platform bridge that you're standing on to enter the room actually retracts into the wall, so it falls away. So you can't just jump one character over and then do the next one, because they fall instantly into the ball pit. And once they fall into the ball pit, the numbered platforms don't come up. So even if you're on the 3rd one, the 4th one won't come up because one player's died, so they all sink in, and then that player on the platform dies. So you have to jump together, and because of how the platforms appear, it's not a straight line. They sort of go to the right, forward, left, forward, right. It's sort of snakes. So when I'm trying to jump 2 characters at the same time, their camera angles end up changing, and this resulted in me just always having one character just jump off to the side to their deaths, and maybe the other character would land on the platform, or I would get one character stuck on the side of the ledge and they would just slowly be sliding down, and I'd just mess up. And trying to move from like 4 to 5, where you have to adjust the camera, or just jump blindly, was just really awkward. And I think the best I ever got to was like platform 8, and I just missed the jump to 9, and we both died. And I actually thought that this was it. This was going to be the blocker, basically, because this section was just seemed impossible to get through, because every time I tried it, at some point I would mess up, because trying to control the 2 characters with the one stick, one stick movement in one hand for one character, and then the other stick for movement for the other character in my other hand, without being able to adjust the camera, was just really awkward. And I had to rely on the camera automatically turning around, but it was often really slow. And there you can see that was my best attempt, and then I just messed it up and died. So I was really annoyed at this, and I think I spent about 10 minutes just trying again and again, just try and get over. And after getting that good result, I never really got there again, and it just started to really piss me off. And I was like, I can't believe this. I've come so far into this game by myself. I'm probably like, I don't know how many hours, but maybe like close to 10 hours in at this point, and I'm thinking, fuck, I'm screwed over by this tiny little room with this simple puzzle of just jumping on these numbered blocks to get across to the other side, and I can't do it. And then I just happened to just turn the camera around, and I realised that this door had a little blue ledge. So I stuck one of the characters on there, and then I just tried to get across with the other character, and I realised this platform didn't fall away. So when I got to this other side, I was like, oh, gutted, there's a door there. And I thought, well, okay, we'll just get the other one over now. And then when I turned, all the platforms had sunk. So I just jumped in, a bit pissed off. And to my surprise, that character spawned on the other side. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I wasted like 10-15 minutes there trying to do it, when all I needed to do was just leave the one on the ledge and go across normally. So that's a big tip for anyone who's stuck on that bit on their own. This unicycle bit was a pain in the arse as well, because trying to get over this rope, I would just often just fall off. And in the end, I think I literally just held the left stick for the guy, sort of top left corner diagonally, and it just got over straight away. It didn't fall off or wobble. And I don't know if that was a little glitch or whatever, but that was the best way I got over there. So yeah, that was a little weird glitch one there, I think. I don't think it should have done that. So this bit here, you go into sort of like I guess it's like Diablo or something like that, sort of dungeon crawler sort of section, where you get this like top-down sort of view, and at this point you're getting chased by this big robot thing who's just going to kill you with the like rolling pin spike thing, and you basically have to get your way through this sort of area by destroying the walls with your magic or using the abilities to phase through other walls. It's sort of like a time sequence, and thankfully you can just leave the one character to just die and just try and get through with the other character, but you've got to go really quick here, and some of the doors take an absolute age to smash through, so the robot thing that's chasing you will just catch up, and you really need to bolt it here with just having one player on it, because if you were doing it with two people, they could both smash the same door, so you'd smash it down quicker. So you're at a definite disadvantage here when you're trying to play it on your own with the two controllers. Even though you're only controlling the one because you just left the other one to die, you're still at a disadvantage because you're not destroying the doors quick enough, and it was a real struggle here to get through. Mainly due to the final room of this sequence, because when you get into this room there's 4 pillars at the very end and you need to destroy all of them, and doing this on your own you're not really that quick enough to do it. Even if you're spamming the button, the thing will catch you up before you've smashed them all. So the way I did it was to build up the wizard's triangle special move, and then once I got there again on my next attempt I used it to destroy 2 of them quickly, leaving me to just smash the others with square, and thankfully I got through that way. But that one was a struggle. Now this fish bit was probably the worst bit for me. It was the most frustrating bit to try and do on my own, because the controls just really let me down and just made it really, really awkward. And I didn't think I'd get past this bit either, but this bit was more, there was no trick to get through it, I didn't think, and it's just a frustrating section. So you basically get this this sort of like bolt thing that you have to pick up using the magnets. So you have to use both characters to pick up, which means you have to both hold down R2, I think, on both controllers so they keep the grip of the magnet on the metal object, and then swim with it together in unison so you can get over to these sections where you need to drop it onto these switches and then tighten it in order to activate the switch. And this bit's just really awkward because there's a giant motherfucking fish in this water, and if it sees you it will eat you, and then that'll kill you outright, and it respawns you at the sort of top area of this underwater section, so you never buy the other character to be able to quickly pick up the thing again and move. So you always find that whenever you die with one character you leave the other one to go and switch back to the one that died in order to swim them down, but by the time you swim down back to where you were, the other character's gotten eaten by the big fish, so you get stuck in this little loop, and it's just really, really frustrating. And because you have to hold R2 down, it just makes moving around awkward because you haven't got enough hands to try and do this on your own. And I ended up like stacking the controllers on sort of top of each other, lying up on the sofa where I was sitting, and then I would sort of try and use one hand to be R2 for both controllers, and then my other hand I'd use like the thumb for one analog stick's control, and then my sort of next finger for the other analog stick. But obviously this meant I didn't have a hand free to be able to use the cameras very well. So when I pick up the magnets for both characters to pick up the object and try and swim to where I needed to go, like with other sections where I'm moving 2 people at the same time, I'd often find the characters would drift, or they would be going to swim in different directions, so the metal object wouldn't move, and then of course the big fish would come down and get me. And it's a really awkward bit. And even when you get the bolt onto the switch thing, and you have to grab the metal object again, and then go in a circle, swim in a circle sort of clockwise, to then tighten it, but then you can easily get eaten again then. So it's just a really, really awkward bit. When you're doing it with 2 players, I'd imagine it's quite easy because you're just both swim down, pick it up and move together, but trying to do this solo was just 10 times harder than it should have been. And that's my fault for playing it solo, I get it, but yeah, this was one of the more bullshit, sort of frustrating moments. Probably my worst bit. I just really didn't like this section. It was just awkward. And the thing there got stuck on that tube look, and I was like, oh my god, it's phased into it. Thankfully it pulled out, but yeah, I was a bit worried at that point. And yeah, as you can see, just respawning characters and then trying to swim them over and getting them over there, then trying to set up the camera right for both characters, because there's like three switches you have to swim this thing over to, which just makes it even more annoying because you finally get to one and then you've got a big swim across the room to get to the next one. because it's like far left, far right, and then top sort of middle area of the room for each switch. And it was just a ball ache section, and it just took me an absolute age. Yeah, did not like it at all. So the garden is where things start to get tricky in terms of combat, because you'll get moves where May has the sickle, and then the husband has this like vine neck that he uses to grab and pull things. And to grab things, you need to hold L2 to aim, and then R2 to grab. And that means that controller's just left to hold them. So then you've got to switch to May to run over to wherever you just pulled down in order to hack them with the sickle. And it's just a really awkward fight. Every enemy in this bit is quite awkward to kill. And these bosses, the burrow boss, you have to grab him with a vine and then try and hack him with May. But the problem is, he doesn't stay grabbed for long, and he will quickly get out of it, and usually you'll find May's the other end of the bloody area because you've left her idle to switch to the bloke. So it can be quite tricky to do a lot of damage quickly with her. Another problem with these fights is that he always spawns in more like stump enemies to just attack you and give you grief. So it's always, you try and attack the boss, but then you get all these other little enemies just attacking you or killing your idle partner, and it was just a really frustrating sort of section of combat in this chapter. It's probably the hardest in the game. It's the hardest point in the game in terms of combat for me, because these enemies are just awkward to get killed, because unfortunately you can't just sickle them with May, because it won't do damage until you grab them and stop them moving. So they were just awkward to try and switch back and forth really quickly, and because of all these respawn enemies that never stopped coming, which is just bullshit, it just made it a real hard sort of fight. And then there's more of these fights as you go through with different sort of enemies. This one is like a sort of tremor worm that will dig through the ground and pop up. But there's another one where they're flying enemies, so they're all high up and you have to pull them down with a vine. And that one was quite tricky as well, because you were just getting shot by all these smaller enemies that protect them. The trick with that one was to just use the bloke and use his like vine neck thing to whack away all the smaller ones, and once they've gone, quickly grab the big one before he spawns in more of them, and then try and sickle them with May. But again, like with this first one, you're not holding on to them for long, so you can't get too many hits in, which just makes it a bit of an awkward sort of fight, to be honest. At this point in the game as well, the platforming sections do start to get a bit trickier, as there are some time-based ones, like this one, where you have to use this watering cannon to raise these platforms below for the other character to bounce on. But if you stop using the water cannon, they will fall quite quickly, and because you've got to go around in a circle doing multiple platforms, it can be quite awkward to do it quick enough before the platforms fall away. So it is a bit of a tricky section. There's another more awkward bit with this sort of leaf climb that you have to do. So May goes to the top, and again with the watering cannon, she has 3 plants that she can fill up with water, and each plant is connected to a different set of 3 leaves below. So when you fill up the watering can with that, it will cause those 3 leaves to raise up, making a ledge for the other character to jump on. But you need to get the character to jump on one of them, then May needs to switch to the other plant to water that to raise the other leaves, allowing the other character to jump across onto that leaf before the other leaf drops through lack of water. And as you can see here, you've got to make several jumps across and then back and then across again, the 3 sets of leaves, in order to make your way up this huge climb to get up to where May is. And that bit there was just really awkward, because you could easily hit your head on the leaf above, causing you to miss the one you're going for. And it's quite small, the view, so it's kind of hard to see where you are at times. And with May, you want to make sure you're sort of facing those plants, so you can easily strafe to the side or just rotate the camera and stand where you are, because you want to try and do that quickly, because as soon as you stop filling up that one to switch to the next plant, that one's on a timer ready to drop the leaves, and it's not that long, so you've really got to be quick to drop your pad and then pick up the other one to jump across, and it's really awkward. And when I got to the top there, I almost ended up wall jumping off the ledge, and that would have really pissed me off. But that was definitely one of the more harder platforming sections in the game. So next up we have this rather annoying encounter. So when you get into this area, you need to wash the purple goo away and then switch to the bloke to populate the ground with seeds. And then when you do that, these enemies spawn, so you have the boss with the shield that will sort of charge at you like a rhino, and then these flying little enemies that will sort of protect him, as well as the little tree stumps coming out of the ground. Now these smaller enemies will just constantly respawn throughout this entire fight, and you can only attack the shield enemy once the bloke grabs him with the vine to pull the shield down. Then May can just hack him with this scythe. But the problem is, 1, you don't hold him for long before he breaks 3. 2, you have all the smaller enemies constantly attacking you. 3, they always respawn. And then 2, May can just easily get killed here, and you can't hit him much to do a lot of damage, so you have to repeat this process over and over again, and it just can be really frustrating, especially when he does that charge move and just kills you both in a single hit. And if you do happen to die here, the checkpoint's a bit annoying because it doesn't checkpoint you right before the fight, so you end up having to use your watering can to clear up the purple goo again, and then switch to the bloke, get the seed power up, and then plant all the flowers in this flower bed area again in order to trigger the enemies. And that's just really annoying, especially when you start the encounter again and then you happen to just get absolutely swarmed by the enemies and killed, only to then have to respawn again and do the whole watering of the plants once more. And I tell you, when that happens a couple of times in a row when you're trying to get past this section, well, it'll really start to piss you off. It was just a really awkward fight, this bit, and there were a few more fights in this room as you go up to the higher sections of the area, but this bit here was the worst one, just for this enemy with the shield and just how awkward it is, because you've got to hold on to that vine by holding down the button on the controller. It's not like one where you're swinging on vines where you just tap it once, so you're kind of trying to move May with one hand while you hold the other one down on the other pad. So it's just an awkward fight. I didn't enjoy these fights in the garden because they were just awkward to try and switch back and forth between just doing it on your own with the 2 controllers. So yeah, that's definitely one of the harder, sort of more bullshit encounters in my opinion. Next up, we have this section here where we get some sort of musical powers. So May now has an ability to sing, which will actually raise these platforms when she sings, and you can see at the bottom there's this yellow bar that drains, and this is her singing ability. So if you hold the button down for too long, eventually it'll run out. And you need to use the singing ability to raise the platforms, but unfortunately it only does the ones that are directly by you. So what this means is you've got to jump across with May, raising the platforms, but you also need to jump across at the same time with the dude, because if you get May across to the other side, she won't be able to use the singing ability to raise all of the vinyls to make platforms for the guy to get across. As you can see here, you can't actually do it, and unfortunately you can't use the same trick from that numbered room where you just kill the other character and hope they respawn across on the other side. So this one here, I was actually forced to get her and him across at the same time, and that was an absolute nightmare trying to do that. The section of the game with these sort of snake microphones was really annoying to try and do solo as well, because these snakes will just instantly start to attack you as soon as you enter their vicinity, and the only way to stop them from attacking them is to use May's singing ability. So you sort of have to hold the button down to sing and get out of the way before the bar depletes and her singing stops. But you'll often find you need to use the guy's symbol as a shield in order to attack things, or the snakes, in order to stop them. So you need to move both of the characters through the area together, and there's just some awkward sections with these where you've got to try and hold down the singing button, move the 2 characters as well as shoot the shield, all doing the same things. And when you've only got two hands to do this, it makes it really awkward. And there's a bit later on where you're on these cables grinding across a room full of snakes, and if you end up getting one character killed, you end up falling behind, you have to go back through the whole bit again, so that can be annoying. The final sort of bit that really annoyed me and was a bit bullshit and tricky to do on my own was this section here where you have to sing into these pipes in order to raise these caps to make a sort of bridge across this pitfall. So you need to try and sing into the left set in order to raise the left platform, and then sing in the right set to raise the right one. So there's only ever 2 on the one side, and then the next 2 will be on the opposite side. So the character's got to sort of jump across, and if forward and then across, forward and then across, left and right to get across to the very far side. So this means he's got to move over, but May's also got to switch between the tubes, and if you stop singing in the one, of course that means that those sets of platforms will fall down, and that was just a quite awkward bit to do on my own. And then this is actually the final one. I forgot about this. This was the final bit that just was a bit tricky to get through. It's not overly hard, but here May goes through this platform and gets across this barrier by singing. So her getting across it is easy, but when you try and get the guy through, it can be really awkward to get the timing down of singing into the wall to make the wall move before the platforms the guy's going to be standing on disappear because they retract into the walls. And that was just a really awkward bit to do, because whenever I'd sing into it, May would just knock him off with the wall moving. But eventually I got through it, and then after that the rest of the game is pretty much easy, and there's no real sort of final boss either. It sort of just goes out on a bit of a whimper. But there you go, the It Took 2 gold trophy. It didn't actually take 2 at all, it just took me and 2 controllers. I didn't need a co-op buddy to do this co-op only game. So yeah, it's kind of bullshit for that reason, really, isn't it? But I'm glad, because I'm glad I still got to play this game, because it's really cool, and I'll now definitely try and get someone to play it with me and have another kind of experience. But for all of those points mentioned, the It Took 2 trophy gets a bullshit trophy rating of... Bullshit.